Hello everyone, welcome back once again to the Book of Lying. So, I did a quick little poll on Twitter to ask just what people wanted to see from these videos, and then it narrowed down a little bit further to being exactly what I should look at next, in which case we are now looking at the various different circuits which tie into Boolean algebra and all sorts of other things that we might touch on a little bit later on, but for the time being is not 100% relevant. And just for a little bit of flavour, I have replicated them all in command block form as well. So, let's get started. The first thing you need to know is that pretty much everything in this row is an expansion of these three circuits. Now, NOT we've already seen, that is just an inversion of the input signal, so when this is on, that's off. Same thing up here. And the way this is working is that we are setting the default state here, which is on, and then we are using this only when it's redstone powered or is otherwise able to complete itself to set that back to being false. So, blip, 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 blip. Pretty straightforward. We've done a whole episode on how to make knots inside of command blocks, so if you are particularly interested, go and check that out in case. NOT is useful for sort of human interface systems where, for whatever reason, they're on by default, but you want them to be off. Then you can set an OR in a NOT in there to ensure that it's the other way around, so it's a bit more human understandable. You turn a thing on, it turns on. You turn it off, it turns off. That kind of thing. Next, though, we have OR, which is arguably the simplest form of redstone circuit. It triggers whenever any of its given inputs are on, including if it's both of them. Doesn't really care much either way. And then this is basically the same as that, just one and inverted. So it's setting itself down to being the stained glass, and then one of these being redstone powered turns that to being the redstone block instead. Very simple so far. The OR will trigger when any input is true, which makes it useful for multiple control circuits, such as, for example, doorways. If you have a door with a button on either side or a pressure plate, then it's functionally an OR gate. Here's where it gets a little bit more complicated. So here we have AND. AND triggers only when both or all of its inputs are on. I could expand this to be 3 or more, or whoever knows how many, but nonetheless, it only triggers when they're both on. And in the case of the redstone, we can use the conditional here to say, if this one triggers, and then this one triggers, then we are able to set the whole thing. What's happening here is that this only triggers when this one is successful, so this one is actually just testing for itself in this particular case. But it only does that when it's redstone powered, so consequently we get the full function there. Pretty straightforward. This is sort of the start of getting into combination locks, if you really want to go high theory with this. In which case, you can have two switches, and the output will only be on as long as they're both on. So you can have one particular side of it be off, call that the lock if you will, and then the inputs, say the button to open the door, won't do a single thing because the other one has to be turned on as well. So that's your first sort of intro to combo locks right there. Very simplistic. We're going to get a bit more complex as we go through this. But as I say, these three circuits are then the building blocks of making all four of these circuits, and they get a little bit more complicated as we go. So our next one is NAND, otherwise known as not AND. And it's very simplistically, as long as the AND would fail, which is to say as long as either of these is off, then the output is still on. So it's only output, it only ceases to output whenever AND would complete, if you will. This is useful for security lockouts, for example, such as when you have a door that leads into a mob farm area where mobs might creep out and such. You want to make sure that the doorway cannot in fact open as long as the mob system is in function, so you have a connection into here, and if the mob farm is not in function, then this would be where that part comes in. And by the way, just to do the command block interpretation, it is exactly what we did to make NOT over there. We just invert the sign, so it starts with the redstone block and then turns into stained glass. Very straightforward. Then onto NOR, or not OR. Same thing with that system over there. Again, just invert it very simplistically. And as long as no input is on, we output a signal. This is literally just an inverted OR gate. Like, this could not be much more simple. It's basically just the NOT gate with more levers. Shouldn't be hard to get, but let me know in the comments if you have any trouble with that. And this is just a case of either one of these sets that to be stained glass. Good example of when this is implemented is the Harvester from Dungeon Maker, because the different sides of the Harvester mob farm have controls to shut off signals coming from the actual flushing system. So there is a maintenance line, which we'll call this one, and there is the actual dead man switch. If both of those are off, then the system can run. So that is an example of a NOR system for you. And here is where it gets considerably more complicated. XOR, otherwise known as exclusive OR. This only triggers when the inputs are not identical. So if this one is on and that one isn't, if that one's on, this one isn't, so yeah. And it's a little bit harder to replicate this in commands, so I have gone the easy route. You can go much higher fort levels, but this is very straightforward. We summon a tagged armor stand, whom we then give any scoreboard value in the success of 0, and then we add 1 every single time that these are triggered, which sets it to either 1 or 2 if either or both of these are triggered, and then as long as the success score is 1, which is minimum 1, or actually 1, we set the redstone block and then we kill off the armor stand, because otherwise we get a whole ton of them. So as long as they are not equal, which is only possible if they're both off, or well, if only one of them is off, thereby meaning that the score is 1, then we get that lovely effect. Good. But the uses of this might start to escape people. So the really obvious one here is when you have a door. Believe it or not, we're going right back to very simple things. But let's say you have a lever on either side of a doorway, and you want changing the lever to change the state of that doorway regardless of what's happening on the other side. You would have an XOR in between the levers and the door. So now, we pull it open once, the door opens, we go through, pull this, it closes, we can lift it up again, it opens, and same thing, so on. One of the simplest things in Minecraft, more or less, and yet we have this particularly complicated circuit. These are not, by the way, the most compact. You can make most of these circuits to be 1 wide. This is just the easiest one to view and explain whilst I'm looking through this. Okay? Hopefully that's not too much. And then we have XNOR, which, again, is exclusive, not OR, or otherwise that inverted. So that one only triggers when the inputs aren't identical. You can then, as a consequence, believe that this only triggers when the inputs are identical. And again, same system up here, we are just looking for either a 0 or a 2, using 2 different command blocks to actually get that signal. Why is this so pivotal? Why do we want to know what an XNOR does compared to an XOR, which just manages a doorway, you might wonder? It's because this is where really complex combination locks come from. If you have an input signal, let's say you have a lever system or something else, and then you have a system that is user input, so maybe it's a memory latch, maybe it's another lever, then the only way that it outputs true is when it's equal to your preset code. And then you can take a bunch of these, wire them together using your AND gate, and you've got a combination lock. So, hopefully, all of this is understandable a bit more, and hopefully you can use this video at the very least as a reference for whenever I'm talking about circuits and what they are meant to do and how they're working, and a little bit on Boolean logic as well. But let me know in the comments what I should talk about next time. So maybe I'll get more into Boolean algebra, maybe I'll talk about how you can combine these circuits in some innovative ways. But I won't know what to talk about unless you tell me down there in the comments. Yes, you. So, otherwise, hope you all enjoyed, and I'll catch you all next time.